This is Ham Radio Perspectives. I'm Quinn, K8QS.
And I'm Tom, W89TDD.
We're also known as the Dit and Duh brothers, and you'll have to guess which one of us is Duh. Yeah, me. Okay, buddy. So today, great topic. And we've gotten a lot of response on videos we've done on antennas and all. But one thing we haven't talked much about is the tuning that has to take place often of the antenna, not the antenna itself, but to give you a way of connecting to that antenna so you are tuning somewhere between your rig and the antenna for a match. We used to call this the matchbox. You would have a matchbox, and then we started calling them antenna tuners. So, right? So depends on how old you are on that one. Yeah. But now everybody says antenna tuners rather than matchboxes. So we've got 7 essentials here for really tuning up your antenna well using the matchboxes or antenna tuners. And Tom is going to start us off with number 1.
Okay, Quinn, number 1. And if you're following this on the video, follow very carefully because it does get a little bit confusing with some of the terminology. But an antenna tuner does not tune the antenna. Okay, that's why we used to call them a matchbox, because that's essentially what it did. The most important thing to know is that an antenna tuner is a misnomer. It's actually an impedance matching network. Your antenna is a physical piece of wire. Turning a dial or hearing relays click on your shack does not magically change the physical length or resonant frequency up in the trees. The antenna itself remains mismatched to your frequency.
Yes, and always a little mismatched. Even if you cut that sucker perfectly and then you start to tune across the band, you know, and suddenly the SWR changes with the same antenna. And I say, what do you do about that? Well, one of these antenna tuners that don't really tune the antenna. Okay, so number 2, an antenna tuner matchbox is really important in order to protect the types of transceivers that are made today, these solid state transceivers with solid state, you know, transistors in the final instead of tubes, which the old vacuum tubes could handle more of off SWR. But man, these new rigs are not so much that way. They often have circuitry in the new rigs where if your SWR starts to go too high, it shuts the rig down to protect it. You know, so think about this as a kind of protection that you want for your rig. And basically what happens here is these tuners will make it so that that antenna thinks that's what's coming from your transmitter is tuned perfectly for that antenna. And all will be well. Essentially, you'll have more or less full output, although some of the antenna tuners, if they sense that the SWR is out of whack, they start reducing the power in your rig. And so your rig is actually putting out less power because it senses that this antenna and the antenna tuner in there are not quite at the match that you would like for perfect 50 ohm.
I think what you didn't mention there, Quinn, is that the tuner acts as an impedance transformer.
Oh, yes.
Okay. And it transforms the 50 ohms that your transceiver expects to see at the end of your coax connection to what the antenna actually is. So essentially, it lies to your radio so it'll output full power.
Right.
Okay, this brings us to number 3. The feed line type that dictates your losses. When you use a tuner in the shack, the high standing wave is still present on the feed line between the tuner and the antenna. Where this matters is the type of feed line you're using. If you're using coax, it's very lossy when operating at a high standing wave. The mismatched energy reflects back and forth inside the cable, dissipating your hour of power as heat before it ever reaches the antenna. Now, ladder line or open wire feed line is a balanced feed line, has incredibly low loss, even at high standing waves. This is why you can put a large multi-band doublet, feed it entirely with ladder line to a balance tuner in the shack, and operate it highly efficiently across almost the entire HF spectrum.
Yeah, or the window line that I use for that, which is 300 ohm, and it's real thin, and it works great. So I remember the time early in our ham career where we were making mistakes by just thinking that any antenna that we had that was more or less matched, and we'd put coax on it, and then feed that coax to a tuner. And if we could, with the tuner, get it close to a 1-to-1, all was well. Boy, were we naive about that. So we had a tremendous mismatch actually out there that we were just pretending that we were all tuned up fine. And the quality, go ahead.
At that point, your tuner becomes a dummy load.
It does. Yeah. You're losing a whole bunch of power in that tuner at that point. So number 4 is the difference between internal and external antenna tuners. So with the new rigs, the solid state rigs, where they're trying to protect them and make it easy for you to operate with this internal antenna tuner, you have to remember that most of these tuners cannot handle a rugged SWR. Some of them will only work to get your SWR down if your actual SWR beyond the tuner is, let's say, 3-to-1 or less. And if it's above that, they'll start cutting back the power, and at some point they may just shut down the rig to protect it because you got current going like crazy at that point. So external tuners, a lot of them out there are really tremendous ones. For a long time, MFJ, which is out of business now, is making a lot of great tuners, and other companies too, Palestar. So you could get an external antenna tuner, even if you had the internal tuner and the external one. So your rig goes to that tuner, and then it goes out to the antenna. Those tuners would really help you with higher SWR and lower losses. So this difference is significant, and take it into account if you're buying a rig. See what that has a built-in antenna tuner. See what people are saying about what kind of SWR it can really handle.
Right. And point number 5, if you're going to work portable or out in the field day, or one of the POTAs, SOTAs, IOTAs, when you're operating portable, perhaps setting up a temporary station outside a motorhome or operating from a park, you're frequently dealing with a compromised, physically short antenna. One of those little shorty verticals or something. And, usually a less than ideal ground plane, because you can't always get the antenna perfectly resonant in the field. A wide range antenna tuner becomes a mandatory piece of gear to force a match to get on the air.
Yeah, that's true, Tom. Number 6 is, where do you put the antenna tuner if you're using one? And so, and this is, wow, is there a lot of misinformation about this? But the ideal place for an antenna tuner is at the antenna, not in the shack. In other words, if you can get the antenna tuned perfectly right at the antenna, then coming down that coax and all, it's a breeze from that point down. You're ready to go. It makes it like the antenna is perfectly tuned itself.
Right.
The problem is that there are not a lot of antenna tuners that are made that will deal with much power, that are remotely operated, that'll be up at the antenna. And so there are different ways of doing that in terms of also running power out to the antenna tuner. Sometimes they'll do it as part of the coax. Sometimes you'll use a different wire to do that power and tuning. And of course, there are automatic antenna tuners that you can put right at the antenna as well. But most hams find that this is a little bit difficult to do, so they don't do it that way. They put the antenna tuner, either they just use the antenna tuner in the rig, new solid state rig with a great antenna tuner, maybe up to 10-to-1 SWR, which would be great. Like your dog is barking there, causing a 10-to-1 SWR right now. And or they get a better antenna tuner and they put it in the shack. Sometimes they put it outside the shack and we'll operate it a little bit closer to the antenna. Maybe on the ground, I've seen some hams will have coax coming down to the ground, the base of the antenna, and then separate coax coming in. So that can help a little bit as well. But the ideal is to get it out there with the antenna, but it's a hard thing to do. So Tom, here we have offered some essentials for using antenna tuners, matchboxes, whatever you want to call them. So you can get your antenna matched as well as possible to the rig that wants to see 50 ohms. The antennas are never perfectly 50 ohms. And so we have these things called matchboxes and antenna tuners. They often today are essential. And we're going to link below to one of our videos that deals with this in particular antenna cases. Thanks for watching. This is Ham Radio Perspectives. We want you to subscribe. Tell us what you think. Make some comments below. And always throw some ideas for new topics at us. We have plenty of ideas because we've been in the hobby so long. We just can't shut up about ham radio. We love it. It's great fun. And but as I was saying to Tom before we started recording, we've been in it so long that we remember when it was a virtue in the ham radio community to BS other hams about your antenna and how well your antenna was working compared to what it was really working like. All right, Tom, take it away.
All right, you're 5'9", solid 5'9", armchair copper here. When I'm Tom, WA9 PDD.
Got a copy on you, good buddy. K8QS. Signing out, 73.